Captain Jake Morrison stood in the docking bay of his ship, watching the Velari transport vessel connect to their airlock. The alien ship looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space, all smooth curves and glowing lights. Jake had been dealing with the Velari for 3 months now, trying to build a peace treaty between their empire and humanity. The talks had gone well, better than anyone expected. Today, the Velari ambassador wanted to give humanity a special gift to celebrate their new friendship. Jake wore his best uniform, the dark blue one with all the medals and ribbons. His crew stood behind him in neat rows, also dressed in their finest clothes. Everyone looked serious and important. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss, and Ambassador Kethver walked through. The Velari looked like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. Kethvar wore flowing robes that seemed to change color as he moved. Behind the ambassador came 2 other Velari carrying a large box made of the same crystal material as their ship. The box was about the size of a coffin and glowed with soft white light from inside. Jake wondered what could be so important that it needed such a fancy container. "Captain Morrison," Kethver said in his musical voice, "today we give you the greatest gift our people can offer. She represents the highest art of our creators, made with technology that took us 1,000 years to perfect." Jake felt confused. She? The gift was a person? He watched as the 2 Velari opened the crystal box. Inside lay a woman, or at least something that looked exactly like a woman. She had long dark hair, pale skin, and wore a simple white dress. Her eyes were closed as if she were sleeping. "This is Lyra," Kethver continued. "She is an artificial being, but do not think she is just a machine. Her mind is as complex as any living creature. She can think, feel, learn, and grow. She has been programmed with knowledge of human culture and language. She exists only to serve and please her owner." The woman in the box opened her eyes. They were the most beautiful green Jake had ever seen, like emeralds with light shining through them. She sat up slowly and looked around the docking bay until her gaze found Jake. When their eyes met, she smiled. "Hello, Captain Morrison," she said. Her voice was soft and musical, almost like the Velari, but warmer somehow. "I am Lyra. I belong to you now." Jake felt his stomach twist. The word belong made him uncomfortable. He had spent his whole life believing that no person should belong to another person. His great-great-grandmother had been born a slave, and his family never forgot that pain. "Ambassador," Jake said carefully, "this is a very generous gift, but I'm not sure I understand. You're giving me a person." Kethver looked puzzled. "She is artificial, Captain, made by our finest scientists and artists. Among our people, such companions are highly valued. They provide perfect service, never complain, never age, never die. She will do whatever you ask without question. This shows how much we value our new alliance with humanity." Lyra stepped out of the crystal box with graceful movements. She was tall, maybe 5 feet 8 inches, with a figure that would make any man look twice. But what struck Jake most was the intelligence in her eyes. This was not some simple robot. She was clearly thinking, aware, alive in every way that mattered. "Captain," Lyra said, walking closer to him, "I have been created for you. I know many things that might please you. I can cook, clean, manage your schedule, provide conversation, and anything else you might desire." The way she said the last part made Jake's face turn red. The crew behind Jake shifted uncomfortably. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do. Some of the younger men looked envious. A few of the women looked disapproving. His first officer, Commander Lisa Park, raised one eyebrow in a way that told Jake exactly what she thought of this situation. "Thank you, Ambassador," Jake said finally. This is indeed a great honor. Please, let me show you proper hospitality while we discuss the details of this gift." For the next hour, Jake entertained HFY and his people in the ship's meeting room. They ate strange Valari foods and drank something that tasted like liquid starlight. All the while, Lyra stood quietly behind Jake's chair, her hands folded, saying nothing unless someone spoke to her directly. HFY explained more about Lyra during the meal. She had been built over 2 years by a team of 50 Valari craftsmen. Her body was made of synthetic materials that felt exactly like human skin and bone. Her brain was a quantum computer more powerful than anything humans had ever built. She had been programmed with the personalities and memories of a dozen different women, creating someone completely unique. "She will learn your preferences quickly," HFY said. "Within days, she will know exactly how you like your coffee, what foods you enjoy, how you prefer your quarters arranged. She will become the perfect companion for you." Jake nodded and smiled, but inside he felt more and more troubled. Everything the ambassador said made Lyra sound like an extremely expensive pet, not a person. But when Jake looked at her, he saw someone who was clearly thinking her own thoughts, making her own observations about the world around her. After the Valari left, Jake stood alone with Lyra in his quarters. She looked around the room with curious eyes, taking in every detail. His quarters were simple: a bed, a desk, some chairs, pictures of Earth on the walls. "Where would you like me to sleep, Captain?" she asked. Jake felt his face get hot again. "There are empty crew quarters on deck 7. I'll have someone show you to one." Lyra looked confused. "I do not understand. Am I not meant to stay with you?" "No," Jake said firmly. "You're a person. Lyra, people deserve their own space, their own privacy. But I am your gift," she said, tilting her head like a puzzled child. "How can I serve you properly if I am not near you?" Jake sat down heavily in his chair. This was going to be more complicated than he thought. 3 days had passed since Lyra arrived on the ship. Jake had given her quarters on deck 7, just as he promised. The room was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and personal storage. Lyra spent her time there when she was not trying to find ways to serve Jake, but every attempt she made seemed to make him more uncomfortable. That morning, Lyra had brought Jake his coffee at exactly 7 o'clock, the way she had calculated he would prefer it. She had studied his eating habits from the ship's computer records and prepared the perfect cup, hot, black, with just a tiny bit of sugar. When she entered his quarters, Jake was sitting at his desk reading reports. "Your coffee, Captain," she said, setting the cup down carefully on his desk. "Thank you, Lyra," Jake replied without looking up. "But you don't need to do this. The food service can bring me coffee." "But I want to serve you," Lyra said. "It is my purpose." Jake finally looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she could not understand. It was not anger or disappointment. It was something sadder, like pain. "You don't have to have a purpose," Jake said quietly. "You can just be yourself." Lyra did not understand what he meant. How could she be herself when she had been created to be his? She left his quarters feeling confused and somehow empty inside. Later that day, Lyra walked through the ship's corridors, observing the crew. She had been programmed with extensive knowledge about human behavior, but watching real humans was different from reading data files. The crew moved through their daily routines with easy familiarity. They talked to each other about work, about their families back on Earth, about their hopes and fears. What struck Lyra most was how they touched each other. Not in intimate ways, but in small, casual gestures that seemed to mean something important. She watched Lieutenant Ben Adams clap Ensign Carol Wright on the shoulder when she solved a difficult engineering problem. She saw Commander Lisa Park squeezed the hand of Dr. Kevin Lai when he looked tired after a long surgery. She observed crew members hugging when they received good news from home. Even Jake touched his crew members. When young Ensign Tony Garcia made a mistake during navigation practice, Jake put his hand on the boy's shoulder and spoke to him kindly. When Chief Engineer Mary Santos showed him improvements she had made to the ship's engines, Jake shook her hand with genuine warmth. When Commander Park brought him difficult news about supply shortages, Jake touched her arm gently while they discussed solutions. But Jake never touched Lyra, not once. When she handed him things, he was careful to take them without their fingers brushing. When she walked beside him in the corridors, he maintained a precise distance between them. When she stood behind his chair during meetings, he never leaned back or gestured in ways that might bring them into contact. At first, Lyra thought this was normal. Perhaps human males did not touch their companions in public. But she noticed that Captain Rodriguez from the ship's sister vessel hugged his wife every time she visited. She saw Lieutenant Colonel Barnes hold hands with her husband during their anniversary dinner in the mess hall. Lyra began to wonder if there was something wrong with her. Perhaps her creators had made an error in her design. Maybe Jake found her appearance displeasing or her personality annoying. She spent hours in her quarters, examining herself in the mirror, trying to find flaws that might explain his behavior. Her synthetic skin felt real enough. Her hair moved naturally. Her face showed expressions just like a human face. She had been programmed with thousands of conversation topics, cultural references, and social skills. Her body had been designed to be attractive to human males based on extensive research by Valari scientists. Yet, Jake treated her like she carried some invisible disease. During the evening meal, Lyra sat alone at a small table in the corner of the mess hall. She did not need to eat, but consuming food helped her understand human experiences better. She watched the crew interact with each other, laughing at jokes, sharing stories, arguing about sports and politics. At the captain's table, Jake ate with his senior officers. They discussed the day's work, made plans for tomorrow, and occasionally told funny stories that made everyone laugh. Lyra noticed how comfortable they all seemed with each other. Commander Park leaned against Jake's chair while pointing at something on his tablet. Dr. Lee reached across the table to steal food from Jake's plate, making Jake grin and push his hand away playfully. "Hey, Lyra," a voice said beside her. She looked up to see Lieutenant Adams approaching with his dinner tray. "Mind if I sit with you?" "Of course," Lyra said, though she felt surprised. Few crew members had spoken to her beyond polite greetings. Ben sat down and started eating his dinner. "How are you settling in?" "Must be weird, suddenly being on a human ship after living with the Valari." "I was not with the Valari before," Lyra explained. "I was created specifically for Captain Morrison. I have never lived anywhere else." Ben paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Wait, you mean you're brand new? This is your first time being alive?" "Yes," Lyra said. "I became conscious 3 days ago when they opened my container." Ben stared at her for a long moment. "That's incredible. And kind of sad? You missed having a childhood, learning things gradually like the rest of us." Lyra had never thought of it that way. "Do you think that is why the captain avoids touching me? Because I am not truly human?" "Jake avoids touching you?" Ben looked surprised. "That doesn't sound like him. He's usually pretty warm with people. He touches everyone else," Lyra said quietly. "But never me. When the Valari brought me here, they said I was meant to serve him, to be his companion. But he treats me like I am something shameful or dangerous." Ben was quiet for a while, thinking. Finally, he said, "Maybe that's exactly why he won't touch you. Jake's not the kind of man who would treat someone like property, even if they were given to him as a gift." "But I want to serve him," Lyra said. "It would make me happy to fulfill my purpose." What if your purpose isn't what you think it is? Ben asked gently. What if you were meant to be more than just someone's servant? Lyra felt something strange inside her chest, like a small light turning on in a dark room. I do not understand. Neither do I, completely, Ben admitted. But I think Jake sees something in you that maybe even you don't see yet. That night, Lyra lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. Her mind processed thousands of thoughts every second, but she kept coming back to what Ben had said. What if her purpose was not what she thought it was? What if Jake was not avoiding her because he found her lacking, but because he saw something more in her? For the first time since her awakening, Lyra began to wonder what she might want for herself, beyond serving others. A week had passed since Lyra's conversation with Lieutenant Adams. She found herself thinking more and more about the things he had said. The questions he raised made her examine her own thoughts and feelings in ways she had never done before. She began to notice things about herself that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her programming. Lyra discovered she liked the color blue better than red. She preferred classical music to the popular songs the crew often played. She enjoyed reading about Earth's history, especially stories about people who had overcome great challenges. These preferences seemed to arise naturally within her, not from any code her creators had written. She also found herself watching Jake with new eyes. Instead of focusing on how she could serve him, she began observing him as a person. She noticed how he always listened carefully when crew members brought him problems, even small ones. She saw how he made decisions based on what was best for everyone, not just what was easiest for himself. She watched him work late into the night, reviewing reports and making plans, always thinking about the safety and welfare of his people. One evening, Lyra found Jake alone on the observation deck. This was her favorite part of the ship, a large room with transparent walls that offered a perfect view of space. Jake stood by the main window, looking out at the stars. He seemed tired, and there was something sad in his posture. Captain, Lyra said softly as she approached. Jake turned and smiled when he saw her. Hello, Lyra. You don't have to call me Captain when we're alone. Jake is fine. Thank you, Jake, she said, enjoying the way his name felt in her mouth. She moved to stand beside him at the window. The stars are beautiful tonight. They always are, Jake replied. But sometimes I need to remind myself to look up and appreciate them. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the endless dance of light in the darkness. Lyra felt peaceful in a way she had never experienced before. There was something about being near Jake that made her feel complete, but not in the way her programming suggested. It was something deeper and more complex. Jake, she said finally, may I ask you something? Of course. Lyra took a breath she did not need and gathered her courage. I was given as a gift, human. Why don't you ever touch me? Jake's face changed, showing surprise and something that might have been pain. He was quiet for a long time, and Lyra began to worry that she had said something wrong. That's a complicated question, Jake said eventually. Can I ask you something first? Do you understand what it means to own another person? I believe so, Lyra said. To own means to possess, to have control over something. On Earth, we used to have slavery, Jake said quietly. People owned other people. They bought and sold them like objects. They forced them to work without pay, treated them badly, and gave them no choices about their own lives. It was one of the darkest chapters in human history. Lyra nodded. She had read about slavery in her studies of human culture, but she had not connected it to her own situation. When the Valari gave you to me, Jake continued, they told me you belonged to me. They said you existed only to serve me, that you would do whatever I asked without question. To them, this was a great honor, but to me, it sounded exactly like slavery. But I am artificial, Lyra pointed out. I was created to serve. It is different. Jake turned to face her fully. Is it? You think, you feel, you learn and grow. You have preferences and opinions. You experience emotions. What makes you different from any other person, except the way you came into existence? Lyra felt something shift inside her mind, like puzzle pieces rearranging themselves into a new pattern. You think I am a person? I know you are, Jake said firmly. From the moment I first looked into your eyes, I could see your consciousness, your awareness. You're not a machine or a tool or a gift. You're Lyra, a unique individual with your own thoughts and feelings. But if I am a person, Lyra said slowly, then why do I want to serve you? Why does the idea of making you happy feel so important to me? Jake smiled sadly. Because that's how they programmed you to feel. The Valari didn't just create your body and mind. They shaped your desires to match what they thought I would want. But Lyra, what you were programmed to want isn't necessarily what you really want. How can I know the difference? She asked. By giving yourself time to figure it out, Jake said. By making your own choices, even small ones. By deciding what you like and don't like based on your own experiences, not on what others expect from you. Lyra felt overwhelmed. Everything she had believed about herself was being turned upside down. Is that why you don't touch me? Because you think I cannot choose for myself? Partly, Jake admitted. If someone can't freely say no to something, then their yes doesn't mean much. I won't touch you or ask anything intimate of you until I'm sure you have real choice in the matter. What if I want you to touch me? Lyra asked. What if I choose that? Jake looked at her with gentle eyes. Then that would be your choice to make. But first, you need to understand what choice really means. You need to know that you can say no to me to anyone about anything, and that will be respected. I can say no to you? The concept seemed impossible. Yes, Jake said. You can tell me to leave you alone. You can refuse to do things I ask. You can disagree with me, argue with me, even be angry with me if you want. You have the right to your own thoughts and feelings, even if they're different from what I might prefer. Lyra stared at him in amazement. The Valari never told me this, because they don't see you as a person, Jake said. They see you as a very sophisticated object. But I see you as Lyra, intelligent, curious, capable of growth and change. I see someone who deserves respect and dignity and the freedom to choose her own path. But what if I choose wrong? Lyra asked. What if I make mistakes? Jake laughed, a warm sound that made Lyra feel lighter inside. Then you'll be just like every other person who ever lived. We all make mistakes, Lyra. That's how we learn and grow. So you avoid touching me because you respect me? Lyra asked, trying to understand. I avoid touching you because I want you to be free to make your own choices about your body and your life, Jake explained. When you truly understand that freedom, when you know you can say yes or no to anything based on your own desires, and your programming, then things might be different. Lyra looked out at the stars again, but now they seemed different somehow. Before, they had just been beautiful lights in the darkness. Now they seemed like possibilities, like destinations. She might choose to explore someday. Thank you for explaining this to me, she said. I think I am beginning to understand. It's going to take time, Jake warned her. Learning to be free after being created for servitude isn't easy, but I believe you can do it. For the first time since her awakening, Lyra felt something she had never experienced before, hope for a future she could shape with her own hands. 2 weeks had passed since Lyra's conversation with Jake on the observation deck. Everything had changed for her since that night. She began each day by asking herself a simple question. What do I want to do today? The answer was never the same. Twice, some days she wanted to learn new things. She spent hours in the ship's library, reading about art, philosophy, science, and history. She discovered she loved stories about people who had fought for freedom and justice. She read about abolitionists who had worked to end slavery, about civil rights leaders who had demanded equality, about explorers who had ventured into unknown territories, not because someone told them to, but because they chose to seek adventure. Other days she wanted to help people, but now she did it because she chose to, not because she was programmed to serve. She assisted Dr. Lee in the medical bay, learning to care for patients. She worked with Chief Engineer Santos, discovering she had a natural talent for understanding complex machinery. She helped Lieutenant Adams train new recruits. Finding that she enjoyed teaching others, the crew had begun treating her differently too. At first, many of them had been unsure how to interact with her. Was she Jake's property? A sophisticated robot? Something between human and machine? But as they watched her make her own choices and express her own opinions, they began to see her as simply Lyra, a crew member like any other. She had developed friendships with several people. Then Adams had become like an older brother to her, always ready with advice or a joke when she needed cheering up. Dr. Lee taught her about medicine and shared stories of his childhood in Korea. Commander Park, who had initially been suspicious of Lyra's presence on the ship, now sought out her opinions on tactical matters, finding that Lyra's unique perspective often led to creative solutions. But the most significant change was in her relationship with Jake. The awkward tension that had existed between them was gone. He no longer avoided her or seemed uncomfortable in her presence. They had become friends, talking easily about everything from ship operations to philosophy, to their dreams for the future. Lyra had also begun making changes to her appearance in living space, small acts of self-expression that felt revolutionary to her. She had requested different clothes from the ship's stores, choosing outfits that reflected her personal taste rather than what she thought others might want to see. She had rearranged her quarters, adding plants and artwork that appealed to her. She had even changed her hairstyle, cutting it shorter because she preferred the way it looked and felt. One morning, as Lyra worked in the ship's hydroponics bay, tending to the plants that helped provide fresh air and food for the crew, Commander Park approached her with a serious expression. "Lyra," she said, "we need to talk. Jake asked me to brief you on something important." Lyra looked up from the tomato plants she had been caring for. Over the past weeks, she had discovered a love of gardening. There was something deeply satisfying about nurturing growing things, helping them thrive and flourish. "What is it, Lisa?" "We received a message from the Velari Empire this morning," Park said. "Ambassador Kethvor is returning to check on their gift to humanity. He wants a full report on your performance and behavior." Lyra felt something cold settle in her stomach. Performance? "The message made it clear that they see you as a prototype," Park explained. "If you have been successful as Jake's companion, they plan to create more like you. Hundreds, maybe thousands of artificial beings to be given as gifts to human leaders, diplomats, and military officers." The garden tool slipped from Lyra's hands. "More like me?" "The Velari think they've created the perfect diplomatic gift," Park continued. "Beautiful, intelligent servants who never age, never complain, never have needs of their own. They're planning to offer them as incentives for trade deals, peace treaties, military alliances." Lyra sat down heavily on a nearby bench. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If the Velari believed their experiment with her had been successful, they would create an entire race of conscious beings designed for servitude. Hundreds or thousands of individuals like her, each one capable of thought and feeling, but programmed to believe they existed only to please others. "They don't understand what they would be doing," Lyra said quietly. "They would be creating people and then enslaving them." "That's exactly what Jake said," Park replied. He's been trying to figure out how to explain human ethics to the Valari without destroying our alliance with them. When will Ambassador Kethfor arrive? 3 days, Park said. Lyra, I need you to understand something. Jake could lie to the ambassador. He could tell him that you've been the perfect servant, that humanity is delighted with their gift. It would preserve our alliance and probably earn humanity valuable concessions in future negotiations. But it would doom others like me to slavery. Lyra finished. Yes, so Jake is going to tell the truth. He's going to explain that humanity cannot accept sentient beings as property, regardless of how they were created. But this might end our peace treaty with the Valari. Lyra stood up, her mind racing. Everything she had learned about choice and freedom suddenly took on new meaning. She was not just making decisions for herself anymore. Her choices could affect the future of others who did not yet exist, but who might someday face the same questions she had faced. Lisa, she said, I need to speak with Jake. She found Jake in his ready room, staring at reports and diplomatic files spread across his desk. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the weight of responsibility in his eyes. You heard. He said, yes. Lyra sat across from him. Jake, I want you to know that whatever you decide to tell the Valari, I will support you. This isn't your burden to carry, Jake said. I'm the captain. These are my decisions to make. But it is my burden, Lyra insisted. I am the proof they will point to. My existence, my behavior, my happiness or unhappiness. All of it will be used to justify what they do next. Jake leaned back in his chair. What do you think we should do? Tell them the truth, Lyra said without hesitation. Tell them that I am not property, that I never was. Tell them that creating conscious beings to serve others is wrong, no matter how advanced the technology or how noble the intentions. Even if it means war between our peoples? Jake asked. Lyra thought about the books she had read, the stories of people who had risked everything to stand up for what was right. She thought about the potential hundreds of beings like her, who might never get the chance to discover their own thoughts and desires if the Valari plan succeeded. Even then, she said firmly, some things are more important than peace. Freedom is one of them. Jake smiled at her, and for the first time since she had known him, he reached across the desk and took her hand. His touch was warm and gentle, and Lyra felt a surge of something she could only call joy. I'm proud of you, he said. You've become everything I hoped you could be. Not a servant or a gift, but a person who stands up for what she believes in. Lyra squeezed his hand in return. You taught me how to be free. Now I want to help others learn the same lesson. 3 days later, when Ambassador Kethfor arrived, he would find not the obedient servant he expected, but a woman who had discovered her own voice and was ready to use it. Ambassador Kethfor arrived exactly on schedule, accompanied by the same 2 assistants who had delivered Lyra 3 weeks earlier. But this time, they brought additional equipment, scanning devices, recording instruments, and data collection. Tablets. They clearly intended to conduct a thorough evaluation of their gift. Jake met them in the same docking bay where Lyra had first awakened. But now everything was different. Lyra stood beside Jake as an equal, not behind him as a servant. She wore the blue uniform of a ship's officer, with lieutenant's bars that Jake had awarded her the previous day. Her posture was confident, her expression alert and independent. Captain Morrison, Kethfor said as he emerged from his transport. We are eager to hear your report on our gift. Has Lyra performed to your satisfaction? She has exceeded every expectation, Jake replied truthfully. But not in the way you might think. The ambassador's large silver eyes fixed on Lyra, scanning her from head to foot. She appears healthy and well-maintained. Have you found her services adequate? I think Lyra should speak for herself, Jake said. Lyra, would you like to tell the ambassador about your experiences? Kethver looked surprised. You allow your companion to speak freely? How unusual. I am not his companion, Lyra said clearly. I am Lieutenant Lyra Morrison, a member of this ship's crew. The ambassador's pale blue skin seemed to grow even paler. Morrison? You have given her your family name? She chose it herself, Jake explained. Just as she chose her rank, her duties, and her place on this ship. I do not understand, Kethver sighed, clearly disturbed. She was created to serve you. She cannot choose anything other than what she was programmed to desire. But I have, Lyra said firmly. Captain Morrison helped me understand that I am more than my programming. I am a person with my own thoughts, feelings, and rights. I serve on this ship not because I was made to, but because I choose to. One of Kethver's assistants activated a scanning device and pointed it at Lyra. Ambassador, her neural patterns show significant deviation from the original programming. Something has gone wrong with her conditioning. Nothing has gone wrong, Jake said. Something has gone right. Lyra has become who she was always meant to be herself. Kethver moved closer to Lyra, studying her with confused eyes. But if you are not serving your owner, what is your purpose? Why do you exist? I exist because I choose to exist, Lyra answered. My purpose is whatever I decide it should be. Right now, I have chosen to help protect and serve humanity not as a slave, but as a free individual who believes in the same values they do. This is not what we intended, Kethver said, turning back to Jake. We gave you a perfect servant, and you have corrupted her programming. You have made her defective. You gave me a person, Jake corrected. A living, thinking, feeling individual. And I did what any decent person should do. I recognized her dignity and helped her claim her freedom. But she was designed to be happy in service, one of the assistants protested. Her satisfaction comes from pleasing others. You have taken that away from her, have you? Lyra stepped forward, addressing the assistant directly. Look at me. Do I seem unhappy? Do I appear dissatisfied with my life? The assistant ran his scanner over her again. Your emotional patterns show contentment, satisfaction, even joy. But these readings do not match your original programming parameters. Because joy based on freedom is different from contentment based on servitude, Lyra explained. I am happier now than I ever was when I believed my only purpose was to serve others. Kethver shook his head. This is unacceptable. We will need to recall you for reprogramming. Your conditioning has clearly been damaged. No, Jake said firmly. Lyra is a free person now. She makes her own choices about where she goes and what she does. She is our creation, Kethver insisted. Our property. She is no one's property, Jake replied. Ambassador, let me explain something about human values. We believe that consciousness creates personhood, and personhood demands freedom. It doesn't matter how someone comes into existence, whether born naturally or created artificially. If they can think and feel and make decisions, then they have the right to control their own destiny. But if we cannot give artificial companions as gifts, what value does our alliance offer?